Hi, this is Martin Clancy, and you're listening to Your Morning Coffee podcast with Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart. Weekly music news for the new music business.
From Trapital, which music trends have outlived the pandemic?
From The Bag, you follow drugs, you get drug addicts and drug dealers, but you start to follow the money, and you don't know where the F it's gonna take you.
I'm glad that wasn't mine. From Hypebot, what came into focus as the touring industry gathered for Pollstar Live? Oh my goodness, Jay, so much to talk about, and it's raining again.
Yeah.
It seems like when we record, it's raining, but we are going to get the podcast going right about now.
Stand by for transmission.
This is London calling.
Wake up! The revolution is at hand!
Your morning coffee is on the air. 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 On the air.
Standing by.
Your morning coffee, the weekly music news for the new music business. It's the highly curated, agitated, advocated, moderated, and liberated digital music information that you need to know. We are your digital music authority. And now from our studios in Hollywood, California, here's your hosts, Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart.
Oh, Jay, it's good to see you, brother.
Good to see you, too.
But
Good to see you.
Other than that, I am feeling great. And yeah, here we go. Another episode 134 of the podcast. And I can't wait to talk about some of the things we've talked about.
Hopefully we've worked out all of the bugs. We had a little ghost in the machine last week, and it happens from time to time, but not like last week. You want to tell our listeners what happened on your end?
Well, we were talking actually about, it was just pouring rain. That was the heavy day that we recorded on a Friday last week because I had to go out of town on Sunday morning, or Saturday morning, I should say. And so literally as I was saving the file, you and I had recorded it, and we record on our own, on each side. So I record myself, Jay records himself, and then I marry them together when I'm editing. And so we had hung up actually from the Zoom call, and I was saving my side, and we had a little power outage at my house, and so that file disappeared. So we have a backup on Zoom, but it sounds terrible. And if you heard the podcast last week, you'll know how terrible it sounded. So we had to slot that in. Had I not had to leave town the next morning, we probably would have just re-recorded it.
Yeah.
But, ghost of the machine, and sometimes those things happen.
Well, thankfully we had a backup, and
yes.
I did have a lot of people who were texting me, Monday morning saying, what happened to Mike's audio? And it's like, you know what? We're just fortunate that we had a backup.
A backup.
And
a backup.
And it happens sometime, but
it happens. Yeah. And it was a combination of events that made it, like I said, we would have just totally re-recorded it had we had the time, or had I had the time, but we did not. So thank you for hanging in there with us, and we still had lots of people listening in, but sometimes you have little boo-boos like that.
Yeah. The show must go on.
The show must go on.
Before we jump in, I had a really fun week this last week. I want to tell you a couple of things. One is I finished that book, the Billy Joel biography by Fred Schewers. Really good book and super interesting. I learned a lot about Billy and his career that I didn't know about. And when you read those biographies or see documentaries, it usually causes you to go back and listen to some of those albums again. And, Nylon Curtain is one of my all-time favorite albums, but there was his live album at Shea Stadium, which I don't think I'd ever really listened to, and it was absolutely fantastic. And, of course, then the backstory behind it. So really, really enjoyed that book.
Billy Joel, sorry for jumping in, but Billy Joel is one of those artists who if you ask just kind of the average person on the street, name the top selling artists of all time, they'll probably know the Eagles, they'll probably know Michael Jackson, but
Elton,
very few
Beatles,
Elton, exactly, the usual suspects. But Billy Joel is on that list. He is amongst the biggest selling artists of all time.
Yeah,
and people forget that, and it was sort of, I wouldn't say under the radar, because people in the industry know that, but people forget, I think, just in the general public, how successful of a recording artist he has been.
Yeah.
Unbelievable amount of records sold.
Fantastic career.
Yeah.
So really quickly, I had a couple of really interesting meetings. Well, they're more lunches with friends. This last week, I had lunch with Maddie Elise from Shark Attack. Love her company. Love her. Philip Bailey from Artist Advocates. Ryan Vaughn from Backline. Both Philip and Ryan are drummers. So that was interesting, but they're super experienced and just really great people. And we had such an amazing time, reconnecting. And then I also got a phone call out of the blue from an old colleague from Warner Music Group, Tony Martinez, who was in town, and he brought his daughter Riley out. And we had a breakfast together yesterday, and it was just so cool reconnecting, with some of these friends in the music industry. And it's always just a joy because we miss a lot of that stuff. I work from my home primarily, and yes, I'll drive into meetings, but I don't go into an office every day. And you and I used to work at Universal together, and we drove in to an office every day, and we saw people at the water cooler. We'd have lunch together, have coffee, and there was this conversation going, and I really miss that sometimes. So it was really cool to reconnect with these cool cats.
Well, and even if we were at those companies, I think Universal is still not back to full everybody in the office every day. I think they still kind of combo it. So yeah, it's I do miss that as well, and it says something about the changing sort of nature of the workplace, though, and that's just kind of the way it is. But Jay, when you tell me about all these things you're doing, I still come back to the same thought, which is, when do you sleep, dude? I mean, it's like it's amazing. And then I know you've been. I mean, there's a couple of wonderful things coming out on Behind the Set List. You guys have been really busy getting some.
We did have a busy week. We typically don't record 2 episodes in 3 days, but we did, and they were really good. We recorded the Behind the Set List podcast with All Time Low, who, I absolutely love that band. One of my favorite songs of all time is Weightless. And there's a line in there, maybe it's not my weekend, but it's going to be my year. And years ago, that was kind of my mantra. And then we got to talk to world-renowned guitar player Joe Bonamassa yesterday, and it was just a joy to talk to him. And we could have talked for hours. And after we kind of stopped recording, I talked to him a little bit about his guitar collection, which hundreds and hundreds of just classic instruments. And I would love to just have a tour through his guitars.
Oh my goodness! Well, he is just, as you said, a renowned vintage guitar collector and an expert on certain things, and he's got the wherewithal to amass what is probably, amongst the biggest collections in the world. And he's got a ridiculous collection.
You know what else he collects is amplifiers.
Yes.
So he's got a lot of these classic amps, and and he'll be the first to say that, the equipment doesn't make the artist.
Correct.
The artist makes the equipment. The reason the Les Paul guitar is so popular is because not only Les Paul, but, people like Jimmy Page and Joe Bonamassa, like these legendary players play it. I mean, if I buy a Les Paul, I'm not going to sound like Joe Bonamassa, but it's still pretty cool that they have these vintage, instruments.
Oh yeah. And he is, when certain pieces show up in the general consciousness, he is often somebody with whom it ends up with, because he's just got such a great eye.
Oh, and you know what, Mike? Before I forget, while we were talking to Joe, he had mentioned that David Lindley had passed away, and I didn't know that. And for those that don't know, David Lindley, he's been a kind of a sideman for Jackson Browne and just tons of celebrity artists, stars, whatever you want to call them. And he put out an album when I was working in record stores called El Rayo X. I think it might have been his first
band.
solo, and it was so good. And I've always been, and he does the falsetto part of the song Stay, by Jackson Brown
album.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I was really bummed out to hear of his passing.
Me too. Yeah, 78 years old. And he's a local LA kid, actually, and was in a band called Kaleidoscope that was signed to Columbia Records, I think, in the late 60s. And yeah, unbelievable. He played the oud and, mandolin and violin. And
he was the one
guitar.
That turned me on to, what are those guitars? Were they Mosrite? What were the guitars that you would order from like the catalog? I forget what they were called.
Like Silvertone.
Silvertone. Yeah, he would play like a Silvertone on stage.
Oh, yeah. Yes,
Crazy.
he had a very, very interesting, eclectic. He's just a miraculous and amazing musician, a great singer too.
Yeah.
And I bumped into him someplace not that long ago, and like all these people, it's the passings, and then of course Wayne Shorter passed away this last week.
Yeah,
a fun, wonderful jazz sax player from Weather Report, and I think he was in his early 80s actually, and but it seems like every week we read about passings of the giants, and
it's heartbreaking.
It is heartbreaking, but yeah. Sorry to hear that, and thanks for bringing that up as well.
Yeah,
and you're also involved in the Grammy organization in terms of a new mentorship that you were involved with Grammy U.
Yeah, this is new for me. I've been a voting member of the Recording Academy for decades, and they asked me to be one of their mentors for Grammy U. Working with college kids, which I am a big fan of. I work with several colleges and will always do that. It's just such a joy to work with them. And as I was telling you before we hit record, I get as much out of it as they do because they're looking at the business in a different way than we did growing up in it. And so it's just been a joy to do. So
and that event, and we went to that event at the Grammy Museum a couple of weeks ago, which ended up being, that was a Grammy U event, which I didn't realize that when we got there. It was with Mercuriadis, and it was fun to see all of those, young faces in the audience, the next generation of people coming up. And you and I were talking about what just a different world it is for them. We came up in an era where it was the major labels were the only way to really get your stuff released. And it's just the floodgates have opened, the rules have been thrown out the window, and the business they're getting into now is just dramatically 180 degrees away from what we started.
That's right. But at the end of the day, it is different, but it all comes back to the song. If it's a great song, it's like that Jonathan Daniel quote I use all the time. If you give me a great song, my job is easy. You give me a good song, my job is impossible.
Possible.
Yeah. And that's the new music business in a nutshell.
Yeah. But there's a great organization through the Grammy organization. The Grammy
Honored
U,
to be a part of it and help mentor. And I had my first session this last week, and it's just been, a highlight of my career to kind of pass along these things that my mentors kind of taught me, and now I can share some of those things with the younger generation. It's pretty cool.
And there I was looking on Hypebot, and there you were, Jay Gilbert, in a piece of Hypebot. How did that come to pass?
Bruce Houghton, our sponsor, friend, colleague, therapist, he decided he was going to put together a piece on Spotify DJ mode. And for those that don't know, Spotify is slowly rolling this out. It's not out to everybody, although it should be soon. And it's basically AI, artificial intelligence, that looks at, what you've been listening to. Think of it as Spotify Wrapped. You know how it says, oh, you've played a lot of this artist, or, here's some of the songs that you've played the most of, or this is the genre or mood that you like the best. And it will suggest things, or maybe it's Discover Weekly, radio, Release Radar, whatever it is. And basically they've just taken Xavier Jernigan, he goes by X. Xavier's worked for Spotify for a long time. They used his voice. And so if you're listening, it's almost like having a DJ that's announcing songs, but there are songs that are based on your listening habits. And if you skip one, he might say something like, okay, let's shift gears and let's try this. And so Bruce asked me if I would contribute to an article he was writing, but then he just went ahead and just ran mine separately. And I think he's doing that with everybody that he's asking. And it's really interesting. Some people like it. Some people don't. Some people think it's gimmicky. I'm one of those people that I like to have sometimes a voice. I like Apple Music Radio. I like Sirius XM. Sometimes I like somebody else to drive. And I don't want to necessarily go pick through, exactly what I want to listen to or the playlist I want to listen to or the album. Sometimes it's like, just handle this. And that's what's really cool about Spotify DJ. I thought it was pretty cool.
Yeah, well, and it's, there's going to be a lot of these things popping up now as people just try different things out, try testing different things. And then when we talk about this sort of AI world, you're going to see a lot of stuff over the next few months. And
yeah, it's been crazy.
Okay. It's not all going to be good,
No.
And you do have to kind of dip your toe in the water and try a bunch of different things and see what resonates.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up AI because there were 4 articles blocked together in your morning coffee this last week on AI, artificial intelligence. Those stories were, the first one was from Wired, the Wired Guide to Artificial Intelligence. It was a really good kind of overview of what it is and how it's used. The other one was from Billboard. The headline was AI is creeping into the functional music market. What happens next? Great piece. Another one from Billboard, it takes a lot of people to create all this AI music. And then the last one was from Think Tank, techno plagiarism and the battle for music in the new age of AI. And last week, and I think maybe even the week before, we talked a little bit about this really cool interview that Tim Ingham had with Dr. Maya Ackerman. She's the co-founder of this AI lyric generating software called Lyric Studio. So think of it as maybe you have a bridge, maybe you have a chorus. You can feed that into the software and it'll help you craft the rest of your song. It's not going to write the song for you, but in your style, your cadence, it can help you. Well, they're coming out with a new software called Melody Studio, which does sort of the same thing. So you feed it your, what key it's in, beats per minute, whatever, and it'll help you finish the song that you're writing. So there's a lot of talk right now about AI and, I had a really great conversation with Martin Clancy. Martin Clancy just wrote this book. He was the editor of this book, Artificial Intelligence and Music Ecosystem. And, I talked to him this week and I said, what are some good things about AI? Talk about that. And his response was very thoughtful. Let's listen in. Martin, thanks so much for joining me today. You have edited a book called Artificial Intelligence and the Music Ecosystem. Tell us a little bit about that and maybe a couple of your key takeaways.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so the book came about because I was doing a PhD on what we call transdisciplinary research. So that's everything in academia and enterprise brought together. And I found that I had to, apart from being a musician, I had to become a paralegal, and then I had to become an ethicist and something of a philosopher. And I was finding it hard to multitask at the best of times. And then I thought, well, why don't I go and ask some experts what they feel? Do they care? Do they share the same things? So I simply sent out a series of cold call emails to some, which were to me very famous people from my research, saying, do you care? And thankfully, a number of them came back, and they have each written their own chapters, or I interviewed them for the book. And the idea is just to present all these different voices to say, whether it's Holly Herndon as an artist, or Jacques Attali, who's a French philosopher, going, yes, I predicted this 40 years ago, which he did, or Scott Cohen, as you know, from Warner's and now with Jukebox, just saying, well, this is what I think about AI and the music ecosystem.
And you started
that's the
2 years ago?
Yeah, I started the book before I finished the PhD. So while I was doing it, I realized that the questions that I was coming to were ethical, which was kind of, when I was doing the interview, a lot of people that left a bad taste in their mouth, and I wasn't comfortable with that term. So I think equitable AI is the one I'm comfortable with now. But what it meant was that beyond the law, it comes down to whether we care or we don't care about whether or not we are employed or what happens And that personal responsibility is the basis of ethics. And also that's the basis of whether or not something is equitable. So do we care whether people work or not?
Yeah. So tell me, what are some positive things about AI?
Yeah, so I tried this as an experiment today because I've been doing a lot of talk recently with industry folk, and a lot of it is dystopian, a lot of it's very fearful. And then I went, okay, can I come up with 9 reasons to be cheerful, or 10 reasons? I think I got to 9, so I wrote some notes here. So the first one, it's great fun. Okay, let's be really clear. It's really, I haven't had so much fun with these tools. Legally, yeah, it's great. The fact that we can pretty much make your own Hollywood movie now, it's mind-bending. So that's good. Second one, it's cheap. The fact that we're running these deep learning systems off your browser and your phone, it's mad. I watched last night, so that's 2. Number 3, I was watching John Oliver's Tonight Show, and I realized that in the space of the last 6 months, everybody is now speaking at a very high level about this. So this would have been the subject of my PhD 18 months ago. Now it's primetime TV. Great. So we actually have a chance. Next good thing is that music, well, it hasn't happened in music yet. So we've got a chance to shape our future. And the pandemic showed us that people care about music, meaning that we saw how fragile the arts are. So we have a choice. The next one is that it's a bit crap, the AI. So we know that we have to participate. The idea that we just sit there and it will do it for us isn't true. Everybody knows that, for instance, ChatGPT, yeah, it's kind of reliable, but not fully reliable. So we have to be there. The next one is that I think that it's going to give us more time, because all musicians are complaining about, I have to do so much social media, I have to be my own manager, I have to do this or this. So all these other AI tools outside generative are good. And the last one is that I think that I did an experiment with my class where I got them to use all these generative tools with the idea being that they should come up with forms of employment. And that was first year, first semester undergraduates. And I was amazed. So I didn't see that coming. So that's my 9th takeaway, that we don't know where this is going. It's the same as ever. No one knows what's happening, and it could be very positive. So there you go.
Wow, enlightening, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very, very interesting. Yeah. And what an interesting experiences and expertise he has. He's a writer, he's a songwriter as well. I mean, he's a musician, he's a manager, he's got a lot of great skill set. And this stuff is coming whether we want it or not. And I especially enjoyed the article we talked about last week, which was talking about how do you ensure copyrights when all of these tools are being used. And all of these things, boy, we keep saying this, but this is going to be the topics that we will talk about almost every week for easily the next year, and I'm sure years beyond that, because this is really, it's coming.
That's right.
And it's coming fast. And so many things to consider.
It really is. And I think one of the things that kicked it off was ChatGPT, which we've been talking about. It's the fastest growing app of all time. It had like 100 million downloads just in January. So AI is now mainstream.
Yes.
And people are talking about it. They're using it as a tool to write, record. They're using it across all aspects of the business. And it's not all nefarious, as our friend Martin Clancy points out. And we may have him back on from time to time to just keep us, enlightened as to how this is all developing.
Yes. Yeah. Which, and it's, we talk about a lot, is it's nice to have these resident experts that can weigh in periodically, because it's super hard to just keep up with everything that's, and the newsletter does a fantastic job of presenting all these articles, but it's fast and furious, and boy, there's just a lot of things to consider, and whether on the business side,
and to your point, sorry to interrupt, to your point, we're fortunate in that we have people like Martin Clancy, who are enlightening us. We have Vicki Nauman, who comes on from time to time. We reach out to Chris Castle. We have our friend Glenn Peoples. We have a lot of these people within the industry that, we don't know everything. We're learning this just like our listeners
That's an understatement
are.
For me.
And it's a joy and it's fun to do, but we're fortunate that we can kind of stand on the shoulders of giants, so to speak.
Without it, absolutely. And but it's and what's interesting too is unlike a lot of trends, I suppose, is this is kind of enveloping almost every aspect of the industry. When you look at things, it's rare that something is impacting the creative side of it and the industry side of it and the everything. AI is just here to stay, and it is, like I said, it's just pervasive in almost every aspect of the business of music, and we will keep talking about it without a doubt. Absolutely.
Yeah, we sure do. And a couple of other things really quickly before we dive in. I know we have kind of this long intro this week, but there's so much to talk about. One is the Recording Academy and the HITS, H-I-T-S, the HITS Act. And we've been having some conversations lately. So I reached out to the Recording Academy because I wanted some clarification on it, because it's going back in front of Congress. And so I had a really interesting conversation with Todd Dupler. He's the VP of Advocacy and Public Policy at the Recording Academy. And he was kind enough to hop on the phone with me and kind of walk me through the Recording Academy's HITS Act. And I think it's super interesting. Let's listen in. Todd, thanks so much for joining me today. The Recording Academy is reintroducing the Help Independent Tracks Succeed, or HITS Act, in Congress. What do we need to know about the HITS Act?
Thanks, Jay. Thanks so much for having me on. The HITS Act is something that we worked on coming out of the pandemic. We realized that independent artists especially needed an incentive to help get back in the studio and create new music. There had been a lot of pandemic relief for live venues and other parts of the ecosystem, but nothing specifically for recorded music. And so what the HITS Act does is really simple. It allows any independent artist or even an independent label that pays for a new studio recording to be able to immediately deduct those costs from their taxes in the first year, instead of having to amortize or spread those costs out over multiple years, which is the case now. And this is a benefit that already exists for the film and television and theatrical production, but it's never applied to music before. And so that just makes a lot of sense for parity, but also to give our indie artists a chance to get into the studio when they bear those costs themselves and make new music, but be able to get that tax benefit right off the bat.
How can my listeners support the act and learn more about it?
Absolutely. So come to our website, recordingacademy.com, and click on advocacy. There's a lot of resources there, first for you to learn about the bill, but also where you can take action. You can write members of Congress, and you can get involved that way to let them know that you support this bill. It was just reintroduced in the House at the beginning of this week by Congresswoman Linda Sanchez of California and Congressman Ron Estes of Kansas. There's a Senate bill that'll be coming very soon with Senator Dianne Feinstein and Senator Marsha Blackburn as the lead sponsors. And so it's bipartisan, it's bicameral, it's a really simple bill. Last year, we got a lot of bipartisan support for it. And so we feel good that this is something that we can advance to become law later this year.
Fantastic. I know you're super busy, Todd. What else are you guys working on?
Sure. So real quickly, I'll mention with the HITS Act also, we know now that this bill also applies to songwriters. Songwriters often go in to create a studio recording as well, to make demos that they can pitch to artists to record. So whenever they bear those costs, that's something that they can do as well. The HITS Act would apply to them. So we're excited about that. And then we're also continuing to work on free expression. This issue of lyrics being used against artists as criminal evidence. We're working to stop and limit that practice nationwide. We're working on royalties for artists and songwriters through the performance rights for radio broadcasts for artists, and also continuing to work to make sure the MLC is implemented correctly under the Music Modernization Act for songwriters. And so we always have a full plate. We're also monitoring the live event ticketing issue, which has been really controversial. So there's just a lot going on all the time.
Super informative, Todd. Thanks so much. And I hope you'll come back on and talk to us again.
I would love to. Thanks so much, Jay.
Yeah, anything like this that is going to help independent artists, super important, and very happy to see things are potentially moving forward. Although, like anything involving Congress and the Senate, it's tough to get stuff over the finish line. It really is.
It is, but they're working hard to do that. And I think it's such a great act and such a, so helpful because look, musicians, they're trying to have a living too, right? It's a profession and they need a little bit of help, like through the pandemic, it affected all of us. And I just love that this is available or will be available to them. So that's pretty cool. And you and I, before we were hitting record, we were talking about Record Store Day. And I wanted to kind of touch on Record Store Day because I'm such a big fan of it. Michael Kurtz and his team over there, they're constantly having these Record Store Day drops. And, this year, I think the main Record Store Day is April 22nd. Yep. But there was a piece you and I were looking at in Billboard where they talked about, the first vinyl recordings of Taylor Swift's, Long Pond sessions and Metallica's new 72 Seasons, they're going to be part of this Record Store Day. These are special vinyl releases, but there are all sorts of amazing artists that are releasing things for Record Store Day this year. It's going to be really great.
The 1975, Paul McCartney, Fleetwood Mac, Elton John, Billy Joel, Van Halen, John Lennon, Post Malone, Dolly Parton. Do we need to say even more? I mean, again, and hats off to those guys because it's just such a great event, and it's really just been so gratifying to see the growth of Record Store Day over the years. And it started in 2008. It seems like it was only yesterday that it started. But there have been so many great Record Store Day exclusive releases, and now you mark that on your calendar, and it's just such a fun event to go to. And you're getting artists that are as they should, and it's so wonderful to hear their stories of talking about how they as pre their career would go into record stores and how important that was just for their musical education as it was for all of us. And it's just, I try to pop into a store at least every other week and just see what's going on. I've got a great store near me called Salzer's in Ventura, and a good friend of mine's got Grady's Record Rack in Ventura. And, it's just, it's nice to, you're enveloped with music when you go into a record store, and it's just, and as I'm sure you feel the same way, it's like you walk in and it's like, these are my people. These are my people.
Yeah, I like the smell of record stores. I like the people there because it's like a club and you all just kind of accept each other no matter where you're from. And when I travel, I always make sure that I check out the local independent record stores at any city that I go to. Last year I was in Portland, Oregon. One of my artists was doing a date in Vancouver, which is just over the river. And Jeff and I, my business partner Jeff and I, drove over to Music Millennium and just spent hours in there and came out with, armfuls of vinyl and other things. And it's just such a joy. And I'm fortunate living here in Los Angeles. There's so many great record stores. And of course the beast, Amoeba is just, and I support all the smaller indies as well, but I have a soft spot in my heart for Amoeba.
Oh yeah, absolutely, without a doubt. It's just, it's just so, and time disappears when you go into a record store. At least for me, it does. Suddenly I look up and it's like, I've already been here for an hour and a half, and and I could be here for another hour and a half, and it's really hard for me to get the hell out of the door because I just want to. There's just so many things to look at and absorb, and good on them for continuing the wonderful event that is Record Store Day, and it's exactly. There's so many things around it. It's just what a wonderful event. So or wonderful. Thing on my calendar. So Jay, we do this show every week, but we could not do it without the wonderful help of our sponsors. I do want to mention that Your Morning Coffee podcast is brought to you by our friends at Bandzoogle. We want to take this time to congratulate Bandzoogle members for surpassing $100 million in commission-free sales of music, merch, and tickets through their websites. Bandzoogle makes it easy to build a stunning website and online store for your music in just minutes. All the features you need are already built in, including dozens of fully customizable templates, tools to sell music, merch, and and tickets commission-free. Mailing list tools to grow your fan list and send newsletters. Integrations with Bandcamp, SoundCloud, YouTube, Bands in Town, and more so you can easily add content from your other online profiles and live support from their musician-friendly teams 7 days a week. Plans start at just $8.29 a month, which includes hosting and your own free custom domain name. Your Morning Coffee podcast listeners can go over to bandzoogle.com to try it free for 30 days and use the promo code MORNINGCOFFEE, all one word, to get 15% off the first year of any subscription. That's bandzoogle.com, promo code MORNINGCOFFEE.
Yes, and we're also brought to you by Hypebot. Since 2004, Hypebot has chronicled the new music industry and the trends and technologies that are changing how music is discovered, consumed, marketed, and monetized. It's edited daily by founder Bruce Houghton. Thank you, Bruce. With help from Alana Bonilla. Hypebot and sister blog Music Think Tank are published by live music discovery and marketing platform Bands in Town. You betcha.
Bands in Town. Over 74 million live music fans trust Bands in Town to get personalized concert alerts, recommendations, and messages from their favorite artists. It's the #1 artist service platform connecting over 560,000 artists with their superfans. Managers, labels, agencies, and artists access their own dashboard to manage and promote their tour dates across all platforms.
And we're also sponsored by Music Business Association. For more than 6 decades, the Music Biz Conference has been the point of origin for inspiration, collaboration in the music business. Join us in Nashville, May 15th through 18th. I'll be attending. I've been going to this conference for a couple of decades now, and it used to be NARM, and it's a great conference, and it'll be great to see all of our colleagues.
Yeah, big thanks to the Music Business Association, Bandzoogle, Hypebot, and Bands in Town. They are the gold standard for sponsorships, and we are so happy to have them here.
Yes,
and in
sir.
case you don't know the guy that I get to yap with every week, he is Master Jay Gilbert. He is a music industry consultant. He is the curator of the fabulous weekly Your Morning Coffee newsletter, and he's a former executive with Universal Music, Sony Music, Warner Music, and Fox Home Entertainment. And just a groovy guy.
Thank you. And this gentleman sitting across from me is Mike Etchart, one of my favorite human beings on this planet, longtime host of Sound and Vision Radio, formerly of SST Records, Warner Music, Capital EMI, and Universal Music Groups.
Yes, and that's where we first met and bonded over Jellyfish and your epic collection of Beatle bootlegs, which I'm like, I got to meet this guy. I got to hang with this guy. So let's jump in, Jay. What do you say to our stories? The first one is from Trapital.
Dan Runcie. Yeah.
A very cool guy, and he does great pieces. And this one is which music trends have outlived the pandemic. And, you know, it's the before times and the during times that the pandemic, and boy, it seems like it was a long time ago, but it was only just a couple of years back, and everything changed. And it's fun.
Yeah, it really did. And remember, Zoom really got its life, you know, because everybody was Skype.
I know
before that. And then it just seemed like when we got the news of the lockdown, Zoom just came out of nowhere. For me anyway, and all of a sudden everybody was using it, but he kicks us off with Clubhouse. And I remember joining Clubhouse, and I thought it was really interesting. I would basically have it on like radio. I would check in, and if somebody had a conversation about a certain topic, at least initially, it was really cool. Now, later, you got people who it became more of a commercial, or they would jump on and yell inappropriate things and all sorts of other things. But he kicks off the article. He says it seemed like yesterday that Clubhouse was full of packed rooms and well-known speakers debating about the music industry. Some shared insights and were very insightful. Others openly admitted to payola with no shame! ! That was the beauty of the moment, but it was one that came and went along with several other short-lived trends.
Yeah. And he says the entire tech industry has come back down to earth after several years of low interest rates and quarantine lockdown inspired trends. And of course, this was going on, but it's all a good thing. We kind of talk about this is, you have to try new things. Not everything is going to be successful. Not everything's going to keep, but there was just a lot of stuff going on. And
And some of the things stuck, right? And we'll talk about that. But a lot of them didn't. We knew that live streaming concerts wasn't necessarily the future of the music industry, but we knew we had a new arrow in our quiver. We had a new thing that we could use, right? But he also talks about things I'd kind of almost forgotten about, like the NFT, characters like Bored Ape Yacht Club, Universal, he calls it Trapital's winner, was when Universal Music Group announced a new music group with, the Bored Ape Yacht Club. It's the type of headline that made perfect sense in November of 2021 when the price of, Ethereum and Bitcoin, they were peaking. But for decades, people have criticized the music industry for not innovating enough. This was an attempt to lead the charge, but now that some bored apes have declined over 95% in value, the heyday is gone.
Right. He mentioned some other contenders. Let's not forget Travis Scott's Fortnite event, Astronomical, which had over 12 million concurrent viewers and nearly 28 million unique visitors. The results were fantastic, but that event was the perfect combination of several timely factors, including, he was a superstar at the height of his popularity, a gaming audience profile that was aligned with the superstar artist fan base, and of course, the beginning of quarantine lockdowns in the early days of the COVID-19 pandemic. So a lot of stuff kind of coincided for that particular event. And
there were millions of dollars in merch sales as well. That was a huge event. And I think what he's saying here is we thought that was going to be the new thing. And look, it still happens and it still is a thing, just not at that level.
Right. And, but he's mentioned too that, the verdict is, where the verdict is still out. There's some concepts and initiatives that had similar momentum in this era. That momentum may not be what it once was, but the core principles are still there behind each of the following examples. He talks about the DEI initiatives that led to real change after George Floyd's murder. The music industry responded with hashtag the show must be paused. Hundreds of millions of dollars were committed to social justice, and there was a promise to elevate more black executives. But again, a lot of that stuff, maybe we saw some improvements, but there's also been some kind of backsliding on that, and he talks about that a little bit. Hopefully maybe that will actually kind of pick up over time. NFTs, and we've talked about NFTs so much, Jay, on the show. And as he said, it's tough to bucket NFTs in a single category since there's so many cases. He says he's still bullish on NFTs as collectibles or tools that grant VIP access. Those solutions may not need to live on the blockchain necessarily, but there's a market for them. The heightened demand for vinyl says more about fans' overall desire for collectibles, memorabilia, and merch, whether it's physical or digital. But he mentions he's skeptical about NFTs as investments that generate returns for consumers. And I don't know. I mean, we sit here today, Jay. If you were at a cocktail party and somebody says, "What do you think about NFTs?" What do you say?
Well, I'm involved with a couple of companies that are working with NFTs, but in a little bit different way. One is marrying physical to digital, in that they've developed this really cool chip that goes on things like lithographs and vinyl and collectibles in general. It could be a bottle of spirits. It could be a signed baseball in a plexiglass case. Whatever it is, these chips are attached to these items, and then they're registered on the blockchain. And so you've kind of got the benefits of both physical and digital. I had breakfast a couple of weeks ago with a gentleman who I consider to be one of the smartest in this area, and he's basically moved away from it and is just saying that, look, the underlying technology is still interesting for certain businesses, but we're not quite there yet on the music side. And I follow, like what Sherry Hu is doing with Water and Music and her team, and they've always been kind of on the cutting edge of Web3, and NFTs is a part of that. And I think that we're still in the early days, even though there was that gold rush on the EDM side with, Blau and Deadmau5 and, all of that, where people were making ridiculous amounts of money on selling these digital collectibles. I do think that gold rush is over. But it's sort of like, think of vinyl. There was a time a few years ago, not that many years ago, where people considered vinyl to be dead.
Yeah.
And then there was this revival because you found out people actually liked having a tactile thing. And then, of course, we read that, half the people that buy vinyl don't own a turntable, and it's a nice collectible for them. And it's whatever the thing is. I do think that NFTs have gotten a bad name. But I do think there's some interesting underlying technology there. And I think they will kind of have a rebirth, just maybe in a different form.
Yeah. Well, other trends that are here to stay, of course, the music rights and sales acquisitions. Hard to believe it, and I've kind of, as we link back, that really started just pre-pandemic in terms of being really in the consciousness of a lot of people, and it got big over the pandemic. But as he mentions here, as Hipgnosis has struggled to raise additional funding due to lower than expected returns from catalog revenue, people question whether these deals would reach the same valuations as before. But I don't see this slowing down. And
well, I think it's only slowing down a little bit because they're running out of the big ticket items that they were looking for. And you and I, in this next amazing piece, we're going to dig into that a little bit deeper. But just really quickly to kind of sum up, he's talking about trends that are here to stay, TikTok and short form video. Now, TikTok is under fire, and, we'll see. Hopefully it will, survive. Because it's such a beast. And when it comes to artist development, we talked about ticket pricing, high prices for live entertainment in general. He thinks that that's here to stay. And really, he finishes the piece off by saying, lately, the big wave is AI, right? Artificial intelligence we've been talking about. He says in 6 months, there may be something else. It's an exciting position to be in. Let's hope the industry can be the one that disrupts and not the place that gets disrupted.
Yeah,
so
great
piece by our friend Dan Runcie over at Trapital.
Well, the next piece this is from something called The Bag, and it's the longest title that we've ever probably had on one of these articles. It says, you follow drugs, you get drug addicts and drug dealers, but you start to follow the money and you don't know where the F it's going to take you, is the name of the article, actually. But it's and that's a quote from The Wire, but the sub-headline is really what the headline should be, and that is a look at the music IP ecosystem, private equity, funds, majors, publishers, entertainment companies. So when you were talking a moment ago about these catalogs, whether it's publishing, masters, name and likeness, or everything included, when you're talking about those, there's this whole ecosystem surrounding that, because if you're going to buy something for hundreds of millions of dollars, for example, you need to have some players behind you. And this is the best piece that I've read that really helps you to understand who's behind all of this. Yes, and as they said, with the influx of cash that's led to a catalog buying spree over the past few years, where does all this money come from? Who is behind these funds that are in the press for acquiring catalogs all of the time? He said, well, let's take a look. And it's laid out like if you're watching a detective show, and they had, how the detectives use the bulletin boards to kind of create their kind of their overview of something they're working on. And this kind of...
And you and I talk about this a lot, right, Mike? When somebody puts out a piece like this, Twitch's Rockonomics, by Will Page was another one. They're so graphically pleasing, and it's so visual that you can go through each one of these sections and really get a sense. It's not super text heavy, although there is text here, but these visuals these graphics are so good.
When we talked to Merc Mercuriadis, I remember asking him, how did you kind of, it's one thing to know the music business, but how did you educate yourself on learning about the investment business, which is completely different? And so, so this world lays out, at the very top, all of these kind of gigantic investment firms, and then how the money goes down to some of the companies that we have heard about. So when you're looking at the top row, you've got Mark Rowan, who works for Apollo, Larry Fink at BlackRock, Steven Schwartzman over at Blackstone, Harvey Schwartz at the Carlyle Group, Bruce Flatt at Brookfield, and Paul Singer at Elliott. These are the top row of the people that have these gigantic pots of money, and then how it goes down to these other groups that we're more familiar with, and then down to the artists that in fact are selling their catalogs. And it's just unbelievable.
Yeah.
It's a really great article and so well laid out, and it really gives you an idea of kind of how this stuff works. And again, this is a world that, I speaking for myself, I don't know. I mean, it's just, companies like BlackRock and Apollo Global and Harborview, I don't know who these people are, but this article really lays it out and talks about the gigantic numbers you're talking about.
Yeah, I didn't know a lot of these. I did know about Blackstone just because hypnosis has been so much in the news, and they talk about Blackstone quite a bit. But some of them, I think they like to stay behind the scenes, actually. And I was speaking to a friend of mine who's an analyst at one of these companies, and he said it was like Fight Club. The first rule of Fight Club is you don't talk about
Right.
Fight Club. And they didn't like having their name in the press. And they didn't want to compete with these other companies that are trying to buy up these intellectual property rights. BlackRock is the world's largest asset manager with over, are you ready for this? $8.6 trillion.
Stunning.
That's just insane. You mentioned Apollo Global, backed by Harborview. They're one of the large players. Brookfield Corp generated $5.2 billion. So, I mean, we could go on and on and on, but there's some serious money behind all of this. And as I don't know if we mentioned, Nate McCartney is the one who wrote this. And as he states, this is just a small glance at the big picture, and it's not new information. Wall Street is making sure, they get their piece, which, brings us beautifully to the next graphic.
Yeah, and I also want to mention what's kind of confusing too is when you talk about these gigantic funds. One's called BlackRock, one is called Blackstone. So there's two different ones like that. Right. And he breaks it down, kind of the buyers in the music ecosystem. So you've got the entertainment companies. You've got, if you look at the pie, and there's four different.
Well, let's talk about, as you go through this, let's talk about what examples might be, because when you say entertainment company, that could be confused with labels and publishers. And, there's been a lot in the press lately with, K-pop and this company Hybe, Hybe, and they're listed as one of these entertainment companies that are buying up intellectual property
like
rights.
Primary Wave, Hybe, Pop House. And then you've got, on the other side, you got labels and publishers, which of course the names that we know and talk about, BMG, Concord, Warner Music, Universal Music, Sony Music. You've also got, of course, the publishers and the other pie slice, CTM Outlander, Round Hill Music, Wise Music Group. So folks, again, on the publishing side of things. And then you've got the funds, the money that trickles down. So you've got, again, stuff I've never heard of, like Eldridge. I'm not familiar with them. KKR, I do know. Harborview, Iconic Artist Group, Influence. So a lot of these companies that are all kind of in this ecosystem. And as we were saying in this graphic, it really lays it out and makes it much more easy to understand kind of who the players are, how it's working. Yeah. And then they drop down to kind of the funds that are acquiring music IP. And then they kind of follow the lines. Again, it's just laid out so well. And I mean, it's just the gigantic amount of money you're talking about, Jay, when in these acquisitions. It's just staggering.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people know and hear about these funds, again, because Hypnosis, KKR, BMG, a lot of these funds are in the press a lot. But I don't know if a lot of people know that there are publishers that are out there like you cited, or that even some of the labels are acquiring these things. And, entertainment companies like Primary Wave and Hybe, there's a lot of players in the space. So they break it up, and it was really informative, to see who all of these players are. Hypnosis probably gets the most press out of these things, but then they get down to, what do some of these things have in common? Who are some of the people, behind the scenes? They talk about Shamrock Capital, and that fund was started by, Disney's family office, and that caught the attention, when Scooter Braun's Ithaca Holdings sold Taylor Swift's master recordings, for somewhere around, I guess, $300 million in 2020. So their funds hold a diverse portfolio outside of music. And that also includes In-Grooves, by the way. However, they recently partnered with Universal Music Group to acquire assets in the, Dr. Dre sale. So we're kind of peeking around the curtain to see, where this money is coming from and who these companies are, who they're run by, and what they're buying. Nate McCartney from The Bag. I wasn't familiar with The Bag, but I'm subscribing now. Nate put together just a fantastic piece, and he talked a little bit about a company that I had heard of, but I didn't really know much about, and that's 23 Capital. You might have remembered them. I think it was with the Taylor Swift thing. Taylor Swift actually made a speech in 2019 Billboard Women in Music event where she voiced her distaste of Ithaca Holdings, Scooter's company that, for buying her catalog, and also calling out George Soros, and then that 23 Capital that I was just talking about, and the Carlyle Group accusing them of helping Scooter Braun fund the acquisition. And so Nate puts together this really cool graphic. It looks like in addition to financing soccer players, 23 Capital's interests also extend into music. And he has a graphic here that says, to get to the money, follow the paper trail, which is really, the theme of this whole article, is that if you want to look at who's acquiring what, follow the money.
Yep. And of course, we've got the majors acquiring music IP as well, including, of course, UMG, Sony, and WMG. And they've been very active in buying catalogs as of late. And
let's talk about a couple of those.
Sure.
You mentioned UMG. They acquired, Sting, for example, Neil Diamond, Bob Dylan, Frank Zappa. Talk about some of the other ones of these, like Sony and Warner Music Group.
Yes, Sony, of course, picked up the Bob Dylan catalog, Paul Simon, the Bruce Springsteen, which, the Springsteen one was interesting because that was, I believe, not only publishing, but also masters, because he'd acquired the rights to his masters. And then WMG had picked up the David Bowie catalog and the Yes catalog. So they are as active in this as others. And it's just, I don't see it slowing down in the near future. It's just going to keep coming. I mean, money is more expensive right now, and that might slow things down just in terms of interest rates, but it is amazing and to look at these charts. So I highly recommend everyone go back and make sure you do pull this up from the newsletter and check it out, because it's maybe one of the more informative things that we've talked about over the last year. It's a fantastic article.
Yeah, it talks about how much some of these artists' catalogs are worth or were being paid for, some of these companies, how much they're worth. It's just a very comprehensive look at this space. And it's one of those I'm going to keep bookmarked, because it's one of those you could read over and over again and come away with new learnings from it. But great piece by Nate McCartney. And just really quickly, if you don't know Nate, he's a former head of music at Verizon. He was an executive at Rock Nation and the co-founder of Superphone. If you remember that company, Superphone, that did, kind of the MMS, it's easy for you to say, like marketing music through text messaging. So kudos to Nate McCartney and The Bag.
Yeah, check it out. It's very interesting and worth the time to check it out. And so, Jay, our last story is from Hypebot. What came into focus as the touring industry gathered for the Pollstar Live event? That was last
I wish
week.
I could have attended that.
Me too. Yeah. And let me actually pull this up. This is great from Hypebot, and it was Pollstar, of course, if you don't know, it is the Bible for the live music side of the business. And boy, it is, if you've bought tickets lately, you realize how hot live music is right now. I mean, we have all been actively buying tickets and spending a lot of money because live music is back. And this is an event they had, and 2,000 executives showed up for that event. It broke its previous attendance record. And, it's talking about certain issues that are going on. And we've talked a lot on the show about the entire Ticketmaster thing and lots of things.
Yeah.
And boy, you and I have both been educated on that particular side of the business and learned a lot over the last few weeks. And that was certainly things that were talked about as well. And
there's a lot of issues here in touring that I wasn't really thinking about that they cover in here, about how challenging it is to hire teams for a lot of these events and things like that. And it sounds like they had some really great kind of breakout meetings and things. But before we jump into that, I just wanted to give a plug for Pollstar. Pollstar, yes, it's the source, for touring. If you want to find out box scores and you want to find out who's on the road and, news about touring, it's just, the industry Bible for that. But they also have these directories that I've purchased for a long, long time. And if you go to their website, they have, like a record company directory. They have an artist management directory, a booking agency directory, concert venue directory. So these are great directories to have because you can, if you want to get in touch with somebody, let's say on the artist management side, you can cross-reference it in the guide and see who manages who and where they're based and what their strengths are, all of that. So a little shout out to Pollstar for those really cool directories.
Yeah, but as we move forward, a lot of things that, and we've talked a little bit about this, the challenges that the live music industry has, which is not demand, but just things like sustainability and supply chain issues and all kinds of things. And a lot of things like, on the production side of things and hiring freelance people versus hiring people in some of the labor unions. Just a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes that really, are challenges. But demand is not one of them. I mean, people want to see this, but boy, if you've gone to the gas station lately, you know how expensive fuel is, and that just things like that factor into the amount of money you can make on touring and the challenging for lower level artists that to either do it or don't do it. It's kind of tough times out there.
It really is. And I've talked to artists and managers who are postponing tours because it's so expensive to go out. There are those that are just trying to do it smarter. Like you mentioned, fuel is more expensive. Buses are like triple what they used to be. Hotels are more expensive. Well, everything's more expensive. And it's really challenging to be profitable on the road. And they address that at this Pollstar event. They talk about things like you just mentioned, that you wouldn't normally think of. But they also talk about, this event's called Pollstar Live with an exclamation point. They're talking about production, and there could be a production live event. And they say that in the same way that Pollstar Live draws such a big turnout from the touring side of the business, Production Live has been developing its own drawing power as well. The opening slate of programming has grown into an event, the likes that could have easily been held as a standalone event. So right now, Production Live is part of Pollstar Live, it looks like, and they're thinking that it may be in the future its own event. But I think I'm going to go to this next year because it just seems like such an amazing event to learn about the touring side of the business.
Yes, absolutely. And boy, it's like you, I'm excited for this summer because there's just, and I always go to Pollstar anyway to just see who's coming, and it's a great way to just find out if your favorite bands are on the road or where they're going to be at a given time. And so it's a great resource for that at the very least. But I'm excited for this summer, but it's some challenges out there for people mounting tours and just a lot of stuff going on. But a great article and worth checking out. And
by the way, we didn't mention that this was written by David Benjamin Di Cristofaro. He is a recent grad available for hire who achieved national success as an award-winning student of the music business, tech, marketing, economics at Berkeley. So check out this article. It's very thoughtful, and it goes deep into all of these different issues with touring that they're trying to solve, and then some of the things that are going well.
Yes, and on that note, Jay, we got to wrap up the show. Can you believe episode 134 is in the books already? We do want to thank our wonderful sponsors, the Music Business Association, Bandzoogle, Hypebot, and Bands in Town. Could not do it without you all folks, so thanks for that. And of course, my good friend Jay Gilbert. So, brother, good seeing you. Look forward to doing this again next week. And on behalf of Jay and myself, we do want to thank you all for listening into the show, because that means Jay and myself, greatly appreciate it. So we'll see you next time on the Your Morning Coffee Podcast.
You've been listening to Your Morning Coffee, the weekly music news program for the new music business. Join Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart next time for the digital music news you need to know.